Do you trust the person you're with? Are they really who they say they are?
He wasn't at all who she thought he was. It was like a knife in the chest because she totally trusted him. And she was wrong.
Is that dating profile real, or are you being catfished? What are the types of things I should be looking for, of whether I should maybe consider going on a date with this guy or never, ever meeting him in my life?
And you might discover that that guy isn't the guy you thought he was at all.
Out of these 5 people, one of them is a murderer. Which one?
I would say that given the right circumstances.
Here to help give us the tools we need to spot a conman is CIA expert and chief of disguise, Jonna Mendez. Now, by the end of this episode, we will have learned together how to protect ourselves from manipulation in any situation.
This is where the bad guys get tripped up a lot of the time. This is where you catch them out.
So there's nothing more unnerving than getting close to someone, trusting them emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, but only to find out later that they're not actually who they say that they are. They have been lying and deceiving you all along the way, and you never actually even saw it coming. Now, having worked undercover at the CIA for 27 years and being the master at deception and illusion as a CIA chief of disguise, what can we look out for to spot that, yes, that person is faking who they say they are?
It depends on how good the person who's doing the faking is, how talented they are, what materials they have, what's moving them forward, what their objective is. My experience at CIA and around the world working with CIA, typically we had scenarios in mind when we went to use disguise, when we went to use fake documents, and it had to do with protecting people. Deception and illusion, of course, as the tools that we would use. We'll talk about body language, for instance. The idea that when we go overseas, typically people come back the first time and they say, "I never understood how they knew I was an American. I wasn't even talking. They just saw me coming and they knew." And it's so many of the vibes that Americans give off. One is the way Europeans tend to think that we're a little rowdy in public. We're too much noise. We're always, especially the guys, everyone shows up in brand new white tennis shoes. Now, maybe that's not such a thing anymore, but 10 years ago, that was like, you just might as well put a sign on you. Everything, the way we smoke is different than the way you smoke. The way we use a knife and fork is different than the way you use a knife and fork. It's on and on. We don't stand up straight. We lean against stuff. If there's a fireplace mantle, we put our elbow on it. And if we're in an elevator, we lean back against the wall. Europeans tend to stand up straight and they stand on 2 legs. Americans like to kind of stand on 1 leg, and it's kind of a slouchy way to stand. You put all of that together, it's a bunch of little pieces. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and you are an American. Well, there's nothing wrong with being an American unless you're getting ready to walk across the bridge and go over to the left bank, say in Paris, because there are choke points in every city where groups of usually young guys are hanging out looking for easy marks. They'll pick you out as the weak link there, and they'll pickpocket you, just like they did with a friend of mine not so terribly long ago in Paris at the bridge. They came up with a group of young men came up with clipboards and surrounded this guy and said, "We're taking a survey," and they just kind of were pressing in on him, and he was waving them away. And when the dust cleared, his wallet was gone and his passport. I teach deception and illusion to Americans going overseas as a form of protection.
And is that the type of thing then that you train them on? You have to stand differently. If you smoke, you have to smoke differently. How does that come into action?
When we would disguise a person, before we even started, we'd say, "Just walk down the hall and back. We want to see your walk." And then you'd sit and talk to them for a few minutes, and you'd figure out, are they people that use their hands all the time? I mean, if they are, that's a tell. So you have to become self-aware of what those things are. That's the beginning of a disguise. We tried to imagine that you were meeting with, let's say, a Russian let's say a Russian intelligence officer in a cafe, just bumping into him. And he's going to go back to his office after lunch and report, oh, I just met with this guy from the American embassy. And this is what he looked like. We wanted everything that he would write down about what you look like to be wrong. All of it. From the top to the bottom. He had brown hair, wrong. He had blue eyes, wrong. He had a pierced ear, wrong. He smoked. He had cigarettes, wrong. He wasn't married, that's wrong. He wore kind of loud cologne, no. So it's useless information. That was basically, that was a structure that we used whenever we approached a case officer.
And when it comes to protecting yourself, what I found interesting is really thinking through the steps of what makes somebody dangerous and what gives you a dangerous scenario. I'm always trying to liken it to your everyday woman of what she struggles with. And when I think about how a lot of us give away information so freely without actually thinking about what that can lead to, that someone can use that information against us. And when talking about disguise and hearing how you think about disguise, part of me always thought is like, oh, you get someone who looks like Tom Cruise. But actually you say you guys do the opposite, where you make them the most unassuming people so that no one's suspecting them. What are some things that you do in order to make someone unassuming?
There was a TV series that was really successful over here. I wonder if you guys saw it. It was called The Americans. Did that?
Oh, yes. Well, I live in America, so yes.
That was a good show, and it was about a couple. They were sleeper Russian agents is the storyline in that show. And they kept giving her disguises in that show, and she just kept looking like the beautiful woman she is with a different wig on. Now she's a beautiful blonde. Now she's a beautiful redhead. It was kind of useless. But him, they turned him into this geek, dweeb, what would you call it? Gave him a terrible little wig. It was all mousy, and it was a bad haircut and some crummy glasses and a little gray suit that didn't really do anything. He was what we call the little gray man. And we had an idea in our head that we wanted you to become a little gray man. Someone who was so boring visually that people literally wouldn't remember if you got on or off the elevator. Mm-hmm. And you can really quiet everything down, just everything down. Wear a terrible wig, which is, if you're a woman, take off all your makeup. Just, you can become kind of nothing, a gray person, and you can move through a crowd. You can move through anything, and people don't even remember that you were there. That is not hard to do.
How much then do you guys play on people's base assumptions about the gray man? So the fact that you can make them boring, bland, average looking, bad hair, drab suit actually makes someone completely invisible. How much do you guys lean on that when it comes to, I actually just wrote a list, so I put age. Like, how much does age make a difference of how someone is either seen or not seen?
You know, it's interesting. Disguise is an additive process. It's always more. It's never less. We can't make you shorter. We can't make you thinner. We can go the other way. We can make you older. We can't really make you younger. But as we make you older, you also become less threatening on every level. Whether you're at work, whether you're on the street, no matter where you are less and less of a threat as you age.
That's what I think about, like, when we put the two together, you put the way someone acts along with how they look, and we make an assumption about who they are. And I don't know if you've seen the show Matlock. So Matlock with Kathy Bates is fascinating. And in the first episode, what I love is that she basically says, because of my age and because I'm a woman, I'm invisible. And I'm going to use that invisibility as my power to get the information that I need and that I want. And I thought about how true that statement was. And as we speak about disguise and as we speak about how people pretend to be someone they're not, and I think about how we rely on people's base assumptions in order to be able to, I use the word manipulate that. What's the benefit of being a female in the CIA undercover versus a male? Or is there a benefit?
there was a good example. My husband, Tony Mendez, Tony and I were asked by the FBI and PBS, the TV station in the States, public broadcasting. They wanted to do a documentary kind of touching on this. It was about surveillance. It was about disguise. So what they proposed to us is that they were going to get a team from the FBI, a surveillance team. They're called the Gs. And the Gs were going to be assigned to follow Tony and I through Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And they were told that we were going to conduct a covert operation. And the Gs made the basic assumption that Tony would carry the football that night, that he would be the action officer, that they should keep an eye on Tony, of course, because he was a guy. And so what we did is we split in a hotel lobby. I kissed Tony on the cheek. I went left. He went right. I turned into an old woman walking a dog down by the river. And then I turned into an old man smoking a cigar. But they realized halfway through the thing, they were like, who's got her? Who's with her? Is somebody with her? And they started doing a little bit of a panic, but it was too late. And so it was just, I mean, we won that challenge, but it was just demonstrating exactly what you're talking about. The woman is underestimated. And for CIA, for our women, the ones doing operations now, that is factored in to the fact that women are under the radar in large parts of the world. Women are I mean, some places in the world you can put on a burqa and no one's going to look under your burqa.
Just to kind of paint the picture in case people haven't come across you or your burqa or any of your work, you were even able to fool the President of the United States with one of your disguises. If you don't mind telling us that story of just how, I think, again, people probably, the unassumingness of a female, the last thing they thought of is that you were in a disguise.
Well, it's the last place you think you're going to wear a disguise. But I was chief of disguise by that point, and we had just finished sort of a 10-year program to develop a mask, an animated mask that would talk just like you and I are talking right now. If I had it on right now, you wouldn't really know. But we needed to demonstrate it at a level that our program would get the attention it needed. Well, there's no higher level in the States than the president. So every morning there's a briefing that the president gets. And I was in on the briefing, and George H.W. Bush was president. And he had been head of CIA at one point. And we had disguised him when he was head of CIA. So I took him some big glossy photos of himself. And I said, remember these? This was fun. And he really, that kind of opened him up. And it's the first time I ever saw that president smile. He liked that. I said, well, I'm the new chief of disguise, and I'm here wearing something new, and I'm going to show it to you. And if it's okay, I'm just going to take it off right now. And he was like, no, wait. And he got up and came over and he walked around, and he had no idea what I had on. So he sat down. He said, okay, take it off. And I did. Tom Cruise peel.
That's amazing. I love that story so much. And I mean, it really is important for us to talk through this, because in reading your book and hearing your stories like this, the deception can be different types. And it can be, like I've said in the past, right? It can help the country, or it can actually be detrimental to somebody. And when I think about the ways that we dismiss, the things that are unassuming, the things that we haven't been taught to actually look out for, are exactly the things that get us trapped. And so when I think about age, when I think about gender, when I think about body language, we've already spoken about that. When I think about temperament of someone, if you meet someone and they seem kind, you just assume they're a very kind person. All of this stuff becomes the manipulation tactic that can really be, detrimental to our lives. And so I would actually love to play a little game with you if you're down for it.
I'm game.
All right, let's do this. So we got 5 images of different people, different ages, nationalities, professions, and I would like you to, if you don't mind, out loud, talk through your thought process of how you would assess these people. So you have an LAPD cop, you have a football coach, you have a doctor, you have a car mechanic, and you have an actress. Now, out of these 5 people, one of them is a murderer. So, now, how would you go about thinking through which one can potentially be the murderer based on knowing base assumptions and what you know about people in disguise?
I would say that anyone can be a murderer, given the right circumstances. Whatever drives people to commit a murder can be all kinds of things. And I'm not sure you can do that based on a facial oval. You certainly can't do it on stylistic differences. That doesn't work. Then your prejudices are what come forward, where you might think, oh, a doctor would never do something like that. He's educated. He's probably wealthy. He's got some money, right? He wouldn't be a murderer, but hold on. He could be a murderer, of course. Police officer up there in the top left looks like everybody's mom. We've seen enough stories about police officers committing murder to know that she could be a murderer. Every single one of them. A car mechanic, he's even got the tools to commit a murder with. The football coach and the actress have a more innocent approach, but they seem to be younger, and that buys them a little bit of goodwill if you're looking for a murderer, but not really, because a football coach is probably going to be a fairly athletic young man, and he could do it. This leaves us with the actress. Now, I'm not looking for a murderer. I'm looking for the innocent person in this group. And if I'm giving the innocent award out right now, she would be my choice. The other 4, I think, could be a murderer in a heartbeat.
Here's the thing, that was fascinating. I loved hearing the way that you thought through it. And I love how you surprised me, where it's like, oh, it can be any of them. And I love that that's almost the takeaway, is that it could be any of them. And yet, everyone at home, I bet you had someone in mind. They're like, oh, I bet you it's this person. So I'm going to reveal the murderer is, drumroll please, the police officer. Her name is Stephanie Lazarus, is a former Los Angeles police detective who killed a romantic rival and concealed the murder for more than 2 decades. On February 24th, 1986, the body of Sherry was found in the apartment she shared with her husband, John, in Los Angeles. She had been beaten and shot 3 times in a struggle. The Los Angeles Police Department initially considered the case a botched burglary and were unable to identify a suspect, but Sherry's father believed that the LAPD officer, Stephanie, who was formerly in a relationship with John, was a prime suspect.
It's those kind of details that anyone, given the right circumstances, could commit that murder. I think the lesson, one of the many lessons from that exercise, is there's a lot to be said for having a healthy skepticism, not to walk around suspecting everyone you know of everything you can think of, but to be a little slow in accepting that things are what they purport to be. Mm-hmm. And especially in this electronic world that we're in, this cyber world that we're in, this artificial intelligence and GPT world that we're in, nothing can be really taken for granted anymore.
That's so true.
Everything can be fake. Not just people. Everything. All of it. It's depressing.
It is, but I love that the fact that there are people like you who are just adamant in trying to help people. And because you were in the CIA, you were also actually in your own somewhat disguise, because you weren't allowed to tell people. So a lot of your friends, I believe, had no idea what you were doing. And in hearing your story, you talk about actually that how you got into the CIA is you were dating this guy, you fall in love with him, you guys get engaged, and 3 days before you guys get married is when he tells you he's actually undercover and in the CIA. So tell me, now going back, having all the education that you now have, having you worked in the CIA, knowing all the tactics and skills that you potentially missed, when you were with your ex of how he was able to hide that he was in the CIA from you? Were there any red flags that you ignored? Were there anything that you saw that you just didn't understand? Or now looking back, were there glaring things that you would identify, you just didn't have the knowledge back then? Coming up.
You learn you can get through things you can't imagine that you could get through. And that is such a boost to your morale.
We'll get right back with our conversation with the CIA Chief of Disguise, Jonna Mendez, in a second. But right now, I want to talk about something that I've just started to learn about that I think everyone needs to know about. And that's regarding the unseen chemicals that are hiding in so many random items that we use every single day. And guys, over time, these chemicals can actually have a huge negative impact on our hormones, which then means that we end up feeling tired, we're grumpy, and we find it very hard to stay confident. That's why you need to care. Horrifyingly, your mattress is actually one of those places that has hidden toxins, which is why I recommend that you look at getting a safe, non-toxic mattress from Birch. Now, every Birch mattress is built with only the finest quality, natural and organic materials to create 100% safe mattresses without harmful chemicals and designed to give you the best, beautiful night's sleep. And right now, Birch is giving 20% off all mattresses and 2 free Eco Rest pillows at birchliving.com/WOI. That's birchliving.com/WOI. My homie, go and sleep better with Birch.
I was from Wichita, Kansas, where I went to Europe. I had never really thought about the CIA. I barely knew that it was out there somewhere, existed, but it was not on my top of my agenda at all. He could not tell me, you're not allowed to divulge your cover and unless you're actually going to marry someone, and then you have to fill out paperwork. So I didn't see that coming at all. I didn't go looking for the CIA, and it didn't come looking for me. It just landed in my lap when I agreed to marry him, and off we went. I don't think I could have seen it. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what the signs would be.
How did he tell you?
We were sitting in Vienna, Austria, in the U-Bahn underground at some Viennese cafe, just chatting. It was sort of a by the way. When he proposed to me, the proposal came on a napkin. We were married for 23 years. He was a good guy.
Yeah, you speak obviously very highly of him in the book, and totally understand that that type of task and role has to be kept undercover. But one of my, someone in my family, they were in love with somebody and they introduced him to the family and we all met him and we all loved him and they were talking about potentially getting engaged. And I think it was like maybe a year later where he then disappeared, and she found out that he had a whole different family, he had kids, and he was living actually in up north in England, and he was living these two different lives. And when I think about how she missed it, right? That type of deception where he obviously, that was a lot of malice, there was a lot of manipulation there, and your scenario is very different. But I just think about how people can hide things like that from us. And so thinking about your ex-husband as being like, you know, trained in the CIA and he fooled you and now you're like the master at it, I was just very curious to, like, in hindsight, if there was anything that you may have ignored.
I've been up close to a scenario like you're describing where a married couple, she discovered eventually that he wasn't at all who she thought he was. He had another life going on simultaneously. And it just, I mean, it was devastating for her to learn that. It was like a knife in the chest because she totally trusted him. And she was wrong. I can't imagine coping with something like that when you really bought into that person 100% and then you find out, oh, it's fake.
Yeah. Thinking about when you trust someone, especially in a relationship. I think that can be one of the hardest things, where you fall in love with somebody and then they completely break your trust. And so I was really thinking about where it can kind of start from the dating side of things. And it's like, if you can somewhat assess the person that you're dating, maybe there are signs that you can take in and acknowledge, or really, keep an eye on in your relationship. And so I'm not sure how familiar you are with the dating scene. Now, I've actually been married for 22 years, so I'm not in the dating scene, haven't been in the dating scene for a long time. But there is this thing called catfishing, where catfishing is basically where you pretend that you're someone. You create a fake profile, you get them to trust you, and then you con them out of like their bank details and their money and things like that. And now catfishing is becoming a really big thing. And when I think about disguise in today's society, how you can disguise yourself online even easier, that obviously very much scares me. And because you're the expert, I wanted to play another game with you if you're down for it. So one of my teammates went and created a fake dating profile. And I'd love to pick your brain in thinking through, what should we be looking for when we're looking at a dating profile? And then what types of questions can we ask to see if their profile is accurate or if their profile is completely fake? So this guy is called Justin. So Justin is 35. He has a woolly hat on. He has a plaid cardigan on. And he says in his description, I like playing guitar, reading, movies, piano, drawing, gaming, art, chess, and catching concerts. All right. So if I was to show you this, what are the types of things I should be looking for, if there's any signs, of whether I should maybe consider going on a date with this guy or never, ever, ever meeting him ever in my life?
I'm kind of glad that I don't have to do this. But if I was in this mix and was receiving these kinds of bios and profiles, I would only respond to those that the person was interested in, or claiming to be interested in things that I was interested in. And then, for instance, this guy reading, what are you looking at? What do you like about it? What do you think about it? And I would go through his little list of things that he likes. I can only really question him if I know something about one of those subjects. I think cynicism and just trying to catch them out from the beginning.
It's sad, but unfortunately needed in this time, in this day and age. I'm just going to read you a couple of stats, actually, with catfishing. So 43% of men have been catfished, which is interesting. This is actually 25% more than women who've been catfished. And they believe these numbers show that men tend to give into catfish traps more than women. So if a woman shows attention and attraction, they're more likely to be fooled by it. To your point, maybe women are more, have more cynicism in them, and more skepticism, I should say. And then it says 53% of people actually admit to lying on their dating profiles. And catfishing has just increased up to 40% on dating apps. So when I look at this image for me, I go, well, he's wearing glasses and he's wearing a hat and it's quite distant. So if I was going to be skeptical, I'd be like, what is he trying to hide? Because I think you can tell a lot in people's eyes. And I would actually love to hear from you. What do you think about eyes and things like that?
I would focus more on the details that he's presenting, on these cards that he says he's holding, his guitar, his reading, his movies, his piano, all of that. That you're able actually to go poking around in and be back and forth with him. Yeah, you'd want to see his eyes, and you'd actually want to know why you're not seeing his eyes. Why in the world on a dating app would this guy be wearing sunglasses? I mean, he may think it looks cool, but that's not where I would look first. I would look at his bio.
Interesting. How do you think through trusting your gut? And what I mean by that is, so many women that I speak to, we've been trained to not listen to our gut. We've been trained to ignore it. So how do you think about trusting your gut? Do you think that it's a valuable skill that we can use? Or do you think it actually misleads us into trusting people we shouldn't trust?
I go with the gut. It's almost a rule at CIA. It actually is. And it's understood at CIA anywhere in the process if it seems wrong. If there's a foreign asset out there who's risking his life to communicate with us, say Moscow, say downtown Moscow, say he's left a dead drop. He's risking everything. If it doesn't feel right, you don't go. Man or woman, whoever. If it doesn't feel right, you go back to the office and you say, it didn't feel right. We're gonna do it again. We'll do it 2 days from now. There's something wrong that night. And we have a history where we're able to look back at a lot of these scenarios where it didn't feel right because it wasn't right. Maybe they had already arrested our foreign asset and they were waiting for us to come. They were going to arrest our guys too. It's such a thing that it's an official excuse. You can not accomplish your goal. You cannot show up. You cannot make the delivery because your gut said, don't do it. And that's perfectly acceptable.
Have you ever found yourself in that situation?
Couple of times. I will tell you that as a woman, when you're confronting that in CIA, you have a little more trepidation because the men there's a funny balance there. Like when you say, I didn't feel right, because you're a woman, you might be questioned. Whereas a man would not be questioned more than likely.
I think this is really powerful because I think this is something that a lot of us women struggle with. And I think that that's why we don't end up trusting our guts, because we've been mocked or we've been ridiculed. It's like, oh, here we go again. You're too sensitive, or you got scared. And it now becomes a negative thing instead of a positive thing, that we've actually used our body to signal when something doesn't feel right. I think then we end up feeling the shame, right? It's like we speak up. In fact, let me just give you a real world scenario. I was around 14 years old. I was walking home from school and I felt like a car was following me and it was just going slow. And in my mind as this young girl, I'm convincing myself all the reasons to not run or to not move quickly. And I'm like, he's probably picking up his daughter. How silly am I going to look if I'm going to run? Oh my God, people are going to laugh at you. Like all the things of the downside to if I trust my gut. And in that moment, though, because the car started getting closer and closer, I chose to just run. How many times or how many women don't run? How many women don't listen to that part of them that says something's not right here because of the shame or the embarrassment that we may feel?
Building a little confidence in yourself gets you past that, where you trust your gut, where you know that you got to pay attention to it. But I don't think there's ever a scenario where you don't listen to it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. There's a story in your book that you share about like the young kid and the old man, and they're walking down and they're whispering. And so part of you's like, I don't know. I don't think I should go down there. And that's the thing that I'm really trying to do with this interview and with my show is, God, we have just been taught a set of false skills, and it gets us into propositions and situations that don't serve us, that can be threatening, that can be dangerous, because we've been taught to ignore our guts, to not listen to it.
When people's lives are maybe hanging in the balance, you, Tony, in the story of Argo, and we wrote a book. We wrote the book Argo to make sure that all the details were written down. The movie is a great movie, but in the book, there's a huge moment where he before. He goes from Washington, he goes to Europe, and he says, so I did that gut check. I went down my list in my head. Yes, did that. Yes, took care of that. Yep, we're good to go. And he got on the plane anyway. And it was just kind of a very public endorsement of what a gut check looks like, especially when important things are at risk.
Yeah. And I mean, you said it earlier, but I just want to applaud you for, as a female, how much harder that would have been, and to still make sure that you listen to it and you don't put yourself in a dangerous position is freaking brave, and I commend you and respect that so much. So thank you for sharing that. I really hope a lot of women do the same, because sometimes it can be life and death. And there's also another story that you talk about in your book. You're so freaking resilient. Like, you are very impressive, and I like to use the language as a freaking badass. I can't remember what you guys call it, but where they're as if you're being held hostage. And so they don't feed you, they keep you in the dark, they make you walk, like they just do the most horrendous things to you.
They set that course up back. This was when terrorism was really coming up very, very strong. And there was always concern that we would be captured and taken hostage, either on an airplane with an airplane hijacking or something. So this was the answer to the question. So what if you get captured and they put you in prison? What are you going to do? Well, nobody knows what they're going to do. And they just made us as miserable as they could. We were given a cover story in that course. At the beginning, they said, all of you, you're going to a conference. It's a scientific conference. We didn't know they were going to take us hostage. We thought we were going to a conference. And they boarded a bus with the dogs, and they put a black bag over my head, and I am claustrophobic. And that whole course was an education for me in how many different ways I'm claustrophobic. It was just horrible. We were in small cells. They put us in boxes. They didn't feed us. So I'm thinking, I was getting really mellow there toward the end of the course. I'm thinking, I don't know anybody who's gone 2.5 days without eating. So they told us some people built imaginary houses, some people redid their cars, and it's mind games. How do you keep sane when you're in insanity? And it's all guys in this course and me. 2 guys that already left the course. And I was determined not to. So I remember the POW said, you can actually, if you're scared enough, you can just leave mentally. You can go think of someplace comfortable and just go there. And I did that and it worked. So I came out and it was like, did you learn anything in that course? Oh yeah. I learned a lot of things. I learned what it's like to be hungry. I learned the first 3 days of that course, I stood in my cell. I stood there. They said, don't sit down. So I didn't sit down. I stood there. I'm going to be braver than the guys. I'm going to be stronger than the guys. I'm just going to be a rock. I could hear the person next to me when they moved down the line. You could hear him slide down the wall. He's sitting down. He's probably sleeping. He was so smart. I stood there for like 3 days. I didn't get any sleep. And I was, it was so self-destructive. But I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know that, A, that's how I would respond, and B, that that's not how you should respond. You should slide down the wall and you should sit. And then what? They come back and they yell at you? Yeah. And then when they leave again, you sit again.
Now, in that moment then, most people break. Most people give up. You said a couple of guys already did. Most people slide. Most people fall on the floor. Like in the real world though, if a terrorist tells you to stand up and you don't, they can shoot you. So the fact that you were resilient enough to do it, get through it and come out the other end even stronger is so admirable, but most people don't. How on earth did you stay standing? And I mean metaphorically and physically. How did you stay standing? What on earth were you telling yourself in that situation? Because here's the thing, if other women can learn the skill of resiliency, obviously, hopefully never get into that extreme, but resiliency in anything, oh my God, the incredible things that we women could keep doing would be amazing. So take me through, every time you wanted a break, how the hell did you not break?
I think adrenaline was important because there was huge adrenaline being in we had no idea that we were going to encounter this thing. They were playing terrible music. The lights were always on. We were barefoot on concrete. The man that's supposed to be my boss ended up in the hospital when it was over because he had nerve damage to his feet.
Wow.
You go in and adrenaline gets you to a certain point, and then it doesn't, because you can't stay jazzed up like that forever. And then you just start being a little more mental about it and thinking about it. Because they would take you out of your cell into this room and they would interrogate you to see, were you really going to this? Were you really going to this scientific conference? Oh yeah. And what was the subject of the conference? And whenever it would start getting off track and you couldn't stay with the story, you had to come up with something to distract them. And I think I mentioned once I just gotten my ears pierced and And it saved me because we went down that rabbit hole, which was not the rabbit hole they wanted to go down. But you learn you can get through things you can't imagine that you could get through. And that is such a boost to your morale.
Okay, so when they're taking you in and they're asking you questions and you're having to keep to this fake story, you talk about basically saying less is always better. Talk to me about the tactics, I guess, of lying. And when you're in a situation like that, obviously you're trying to save your life, but also on the flip side of when someone is lying to you, what tactics are they using? So talk to me about how to say less when someone's asking you questions. And then you talk about peeling the onion, where you're giving just enough information, but you're not giving away the core of what's real.
Less is more on so many levels, in so many scenarios, in so many situations. Information is power. Information at the CIA, we used to say, is siloed. Access to that information or that group of information or that piece of information was power. And so at CIA, we were criticized for it. We kept it in silos. And if you weren't authorized to know it, you couldn't learn it. It's a whole philosophy, saying less, dealing with more, saying less. It's in the DNA.
So when you were, let's say, peeling back the onion, giving them slight bits of information in this, kind of set up scenario, how do you make sure you're giving them just enough that's satisfying, but not enough where you forget and then trap yourself later?
Well, that's the thing about lying, isn't it? That's the whole thing about lying, is remembering what you said.
Yeah.
And not deviating too far from it. This is where everybody gets tripped up, and this is where the bad guys get tripped up a lot of the time. This is where you catch them out. This is where the catfishing guys, ask the questions, and then ask some more questions and a few more questions, and you might discover that guy isn't the guy you thought he was at all. And that the point of it. This idea about, we're back to the idea of being a little cynical. Spy Museum has become my third family. CIA was my second family. The family was my first family. But at the Spy Museum, there's a big logo on one of the walls. Nothing is as it seems. That's the motto of the Spy Museum. And when you go in, everything is something else. You think you're looking at a button. It's actually a compass on somebody's coat during the Second World War. You think you're looking at a package of dog warming medicine pills in plastic. No, that's secret writing developer packaged to look like dog warming medicine, so nobody will mistake it for something else. Everything is something else. It looks like, hold on, it looks like a Sharpie. You think it's a Sharpie, but it's not a Sharpie. It's a camera. And in it is a camera that can take 100 pictures. And you can make big blow-up prints from it. Everything in there. You think that looks like just a regular guy's tie? No, it has a camera in it. Every bit of it is something else. It's fooled the eye. And that's the world I lived in for 27 years at the CIA. It makes me question, what am I looking at? Is that really a tree stump? Or is it something that looks like a tree stump, but there's a detector inside that counts nuclear passes and shoots it up to a satellite? Just looks like a tree stump.
Wow. I wouldn't even know that existed.
Oh, yeah. Amazing stuff.
So how do you make sure you're not always paranoid?
I think by being smart about it. You're talking about walking down the street when you're 14 and this car is going too slow. Your instincts were good, right? Your instincts said, this is not a good scenario. I'm going to leave this situation. I'm going to move away from it. That's the piece of steel that runs through it. You trust your instincts, whatever it is. And you know that you have good instincts after a while. You learn to trust yourself. And that is what keeps you safe through your life. I think smart cynicism, just like, what is that? And what is that? And just because it looks like this doesn't mean that that's what it is. I was genuinely interested in the technology. First, it was photography, all aspects of photography, making microdots, doing all kinds of things with cameras.
Can you explain what microdots are? This is insane that this exists.
Microdot is a full page of text reduced down 200 times until it's a black speck. It's the size of a period at the end of a sentence. You could send it to someone. You could put it under the flap of an envelope. You can put it on the back of a stamp. You can put it in a copy of your favorite magazine and mail the magazine. You can, 1,000 ways you can send it. Or the person that receives it has a special little lens. It's called a Stanhope. And all he needs is a piece of paper and a needle and just poke a hole in the piece of paper. Put the lens. Paper is to hold the lens. It looks like a grain of rice. You get some spit, pick up the dot, put it on the end of the lens, and you hold it up to the sun, and you can read an A1, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, a whole page of text. It's a very secure way to transmit information. It's so secure, you can't find it.
Understanding the skill sets needed for disguise and those types of technologies is exactly what enabled you to grow in the ranks of the CIA as a female when many people weren't able to?
Yes, I didn't want to be a secretary where I started. When I got into photography, they put me in the dark rooms. I didn't want to be in the dark rooms. I mean, I did it. I was good at it, but that isn't where I wanted to be, doing operations out in the field, meeting with people, saving lives. I don't know, collecting intelligence. That's what I wanted to do. And photography was my path to do that. The hard part there was I got the technical skills, but nobody was going to send me out onto the street to do the work because that was considered men's work. And actually, I just kind of had to bide my time until we got busy a couple of times, and there was no one there but me. And an operation came up, and my boss came in and said, "Can you do this?" And I said, "Of course I can do that." It was just a little bit of persistence. Men had always said, women can, they can do some analysis at CIA. They can do some admin stuff, maybe some budget stuff. They can do that. But operations, that's real work. That's men's work. That was the mindset. And that breaking through that was the hard part. And it's just persistence. I also made a case, then I stuck with it till the day I left, that I don't think being a woman is a disadvantage in any way at all. I think that women actually make better case officers than men because women have this inherent soft skill that guys do not. Mm-hmm. So when you're meeting with a person from another country and they've come in through some conduit and they're talking to you about, I have that information, and you say you want that information, but I'm a little worried about giving you that information because I have a family, I've got kids, and they have to be able to trust you and believe you when you say, if you will work with us, if anything goes wrong, we will bring you out and your kids out. You want your kids to go to school in the West. You do this for 5 years, 8 years, whatever it is. We'll bring you out. Some foreigners will work for us for those kinds of assurances. That's all they want. They don't want money. They want to get their families out of wherever they are. They want to come to the West. That's a big bargaining tool. But what you're doing, in a way, is you're bargaining with them. You're going to take a risk. We're going to promise to support you in every way we can and keep you safe. And if we don't think you're safe, we will bring you back. And we brought a lot of people out. And that story of Argo with my husband is one story of bringing Americans out, but we brought lots of people out. Did you see the movie Argo?
I did. It was phenomenal. I had no idea it was your husband until I started to read your book.
We rescue people. People work for us. We make a commitment to them. We'll go in and get them. Those were some stories.
Yeah, God. Just as a woman to another woman, thank you. Thank you for doing the hard thing, for not only protecting, obviously, the United States, but being a voice for women and showing that you can be so good that you cannot be ignored. And whether you're a woman or not, that if you do the job and you do it well and you command the room, then people will absolutely start to follow suit and respect.
I was describing one woman in my book who I admired so much. I said at a certain point in her career, she decided to flex, not curtsy. And I loved that phrase.
All right, so we've got a couple of speed round questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, what is the craziest hidden camera that you've seen that most people are the least likely to expect?
Well, there was the fake pregnancy belly.
What?
You would strap it on. The camera lived in the belly and it shot through a button on your blouse. Good, right?
Oh my God. And why would it be in a pregnancy belly versus just a general shirt? Is it because you're, again, least likely to suspect someone that's pregnant?
A pregnant woman can kind of walk slowly down the street. We had to teach our fake pregnant woman how to do the pregnant woman walk. She's beyond suspicion. We could have put it in a baby buggy. We could put them in bras too, but we like the belly.
That's genius. Oh my God. Okay. The simplest and quickest disguise that your average person can't detect?
Well, it depends on woman, a man, and usually it has to do with hair. Your hair, pull it up, put on a baseball cap. Bam. I'm thinking right now of I just disguised a man at the museum. For him, I put on Ray-Bans and got some black and gave him that stubble.
Oh yeah. Oh.
I put a tattoo on his hand. I mean, it took 2 minutes.
Nice. All right. Fake stubble, sunglasses, and a hat.
Fake stubble is a good look.
Yeah. All right. So what would you do? In fact, if I was to say to you, okay, you had to walk out the room and come back in 3 minutes, what would you do to change how you look? That would be trickery that I would never guess.
Oh gosh. Well, I have a trunk full of stuff. I could go in. I could become an old man in a heartbeat.
I know, actually, that you're not the right person to ask.
It's a mustache is a powerful beginning. I've got a really good grayish, blondish mustache, pair of glasses, and a cigar.
Interesting. Why is the cigar? Yeah, you brought that up twice.
It's so easy. People see that cigar and they make all these assumptions about you. They just do. A, that you're going to smell bad when you get close to them. It's a very masculine thing. It's a very masculine thing. Pair of glasses, maybe.
That's amazing. Okay, and then the last one is one thing that we can do to protect ourselves when we sense danger and your gut is screaming to run.
I would say run. If your gut's telling you to run, I would say run. Get as far away from whatever it is that's worrying you as you can. And if you're not in a public place, get to a public place. Your surroundings can protect you just because people aren't willing to do some things just in a wide open space that they would in a more enclosed scenario. So get out in the open.
Recently I can't remember who I heard it from, but because I'm always trying to think about how women protect themselves, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. And somebody actually said that if you're in public, the best thing to do is shout water. Because if you shout fire, everyone runs. If you shout gun, everyone runs. If you shout water, no one's like it feels like they're in danger, but it's just enough of a weird thing to shout that people look around to be like, why is someone shouting water? So I actually found that fascinating.
Just to get them to turn their heads.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's kind of cute.
Yeah, I found that fascinating.
I might keep that.
Oh, it's all yours.
Thank you.
We've done an even exchange today, I feel.
We have indeed.
That was fun. Thank you. Jonna Mendez, you have been amazing. Your book, In True Face, is fantastic. Where can people find you and your book and all the other things that you're doing?
I've been doing some cruises recently. It's amazing. Cruises, I've turned into a cruise queen to speak on ships. Who knew you could do that as a retiree, that they ask you to come and speak on
That's
the
so
ship?
cool.
You can find the book on Amazon. You can find it just about anywhere.
Amazing. Well, I just want to say thank you again for your service. Your work, your book is utterly phenomenal, and how you show up for women and just for the world to protect us. Thank you so much. It really has just meant so much to me to meet you and have this time with you. So thank you.
Thank you. You do a great interview. It's fun.
Thank you so much. Guys, you have got to go check out her book. I'm telling you, you will not regret it. It is a story full of just anecdotes of moments where she as a woman showed up and was super freaking strong despite all the problems that she had to face. And it's a story of someone who really cares, is really trying to make a difference in the world with such cool stuff like disguises and gadgets and spy stuff. So guys, you got to go check out her. You got to check out her book. If you're not subscribed, click that subscribe button down there. And until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace out. If you have suspicion that maybe he's a psychopath or a sociopath or even a serial killer, and you want to know if your suspicion is right, then click here right now.
Many of them are less smooth than Bundy, but they all have a way, and they all